Today, the president of the European Commission proposed a new plan to allow an additional 160,000 refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and other countries. The plan would distribute the refugees among European Union member nations with binding quotas. The United States has accepted 1,500 Syrian refugees in the last 4 years, with almost all of them coming just this year. Here's what the presidential candidates have to say about accepting more Syrian refugees in the United States.
I think the entire world has to come together. It should not be just one or two countries, or not just Europe and the United States. We should do our part, as should the Europeans, but this is a broader global crisis.
I would be open. America's always been open to allowing a certain number of refugees from around the world to come to the United States.
I think we do have a responsibility in terms of taking some more folks in, making sure they assimilate, and at the same time helping people to actually be safe as they move. That's logistical support. But this is fundamentally an issue that Europe has to come to grips with.
Do you object to them coming to the USA?
I hate the concept of it, but on a humanitarian basis, with what's happening, you have to.
Republican presidential candidate Scott Walker tweeted this today: "We shouldn't be taking in any more Syrian refugees right now. The real problem here is the Obama administration's failure to deal with ISIS." And Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders said this: "Obviously, the U.S. has got to work with Europe, and I think what they want to establish, which is right, is not all refugees end up in Germany or in the U.K., and that's what they're working on, and I think the United States has got to be supportive and work with them." Joining us now is David Milibrand, President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee and former Secretary of State Foreign Affairs for the United Kingdom. Back with us, Steve Clemens and Michael Steele. Mr. Milibrand, first of all, the situation in Europe, what is the latest status, and what do you see happening in the next couple of weeks?
Well, there are now upwards of 600,000, even 800,000 refugees expected into Europe this year, most of them into Germany. The real eye of the storm at the moment is in Greece. We have teams, the International Rescue Committee has teams in the 4 Greek islands. Lesbos is the largest island, just 6 kilometers from the Turkish border across the Mediterranean Sea. And there you've got 25,000 people stuck on an island, 3,000 a day coming on, less than that going off, and appalling conditions for people who've been on an interminable trek, many of them losing loved ones on the way. And the feebleness of the European response has been exposed in graphic form over the last couple of weeks. But obviously this has been a problem far longer in the making. 4 million refugees, the vast bulk of them in neighboring states to Syria. And from our point of view as a humanitarian agency, there are 2 absolute and immediate priorities. One, in Europe, there needs to be a far better effort at processing and relocating those refugees, resettling them in a safe way. But obviously the flow has to be tackled with a serious attempt to improve conditions in the neighboring states to Syria. And finally, after 4 years of lassitude and inertia, a real drive of political and diplomatic muscle to try to bring this conflict to a close.
Steve, you hear Mr. Milibrand refer to the European response as feeble. United States, 1,500.
1,500 people, and they say 1,500 people that it took 18 months to vet. So those 1,500 people waited an average of 18 months to get here. So when they talk about ramping up, it's not only the numbers we're talking about, it's about, you talk about, the Free Syrian Army and trying to set up moderate rebels. These are people trying to save their lives, save their children's lives. They are leaving their homes under duress in fear for their safety, and we're vetting them at such a level that it takes us 18 months together. David Milibrand has become the conscience of the United States by challenging us and saying we should at least take 65,000 such refugees a year, which is such an order of magnitude higher than what we're doing. Martin O'Malley has embraced this, but no one has set a number as to what we should have done like David has done. The Germans are saying they'll take 500,000 for four years. The British, his country, 20,000 over 5 years. So that's pretty pathetic, I'm sorry to say. But the point is, Hillary Clinton is right. Everyone should do it. But the way that she hedged it makes us seem so pathetically on the edge of any real absorption of these people that are in trouble and need. And that convinces Muslims in the Middle East that we don't care about their lives.
Michael Steele, Martin O'Malley pointed out that if we were doing this on a proportional basis to our population, to Germany's population, we could accept 800,000. I don't think that's a number you're going to hear from anybody on the presidential debate stage next week.
Well, that's Martin O'Malley, and so that doesn't surprise me at all. You know, the more the merrier, without any regard to consequences. And I think that's a big part of this as well. And you have to ask yourself, why are the Europeans sort of slow-boating this and taking their time and not responding in a way that, you know, we should see them respond? The U.S. the same way. So what is it about Syria? What is it about these refugees? What is it about the situation here? And I think the foreign minister's last point is the starting point for a lot of these allies in NATO and around the globe. Is what is the situation? Military, Islamic terrorism, all of that, with respect to Syria, and how does that then bleed out through the refugees? And that's a concern. And I think it's a matter of balance right now, and it's one that, unfortunately, real lives are being caught in the middle of that trap.
Mr. Milibrand, how open are the communication channels among all the governments in Europe about trying to coordinate how many they're taking in each country? Is each country just kind of thinking about this and talking about it behind closed doors?
The explanation is very clear. Europe has been focused, first of all, on the euro crisis in Greece, then on the Ukraine crisis over the last few years, and Syria has been really taken backstage. It's taken German leadership to overcome what we'd call in the UK beggar my neighbour, inward-looking thinking, which has been predominant. It remains a divided continent, Europe, but German leadership has really sprung France into action. Italy and Belgium will follow, and I think there will be a big number that comes out, a big-ish number that comes out of the European summit on Monday. The tragedy really, it seems to me, for the United States is that historically you have been the country that has led the world in refugee resettlement. At the height of the Vietnamese boat people coming here in the early 1980s, 150,000 a year. And that's what makes the 1,500 figure that Steve has spoken to so shocking, I think, to many people. This has been the country that's shown there are safe ways of integrating communities, and strikingly, there are successful Syrian-American communities in the United States already here saying we want to bring our brothers, our cousins, our friends here, and they're not allowed to.
What would you say to Americans and American policymakers on the issue of the fear of terrorists slipping in among such a large group?
I think it's a really important point to address and to be open about. It's tougher to get to the United States as a refugee than in any other form. The security vetting that goes on is very substantial and very, very serious. And I think that what's important is that we can see that those Syrian Americans who have made it here, they're becoming productive citizens. I've met them myself, the International Rescue Committee, as well as doing work, humanitarian work, in trouble spots around the world in 35 countries. We resettle 10,000 new Americans every year. I've been to Phoenix, I've met the Syrian American community that we've helped resettle here. They're going to become some of the most patriotic people in this country because they know this country has given them life and has given them a chance. And Steve's point, I think, is really profound and important. He said it in passing. It's easy to say, look, 1,500 is very few, 65,000 isn't going to end the war in Syria. But as a mark of showing the people of the Middle East that we are willing to stand with them, that even at this time of when it's proved impossible to do the hard thing, which is to end the war, we're willing to do some things that are more viable. And I think that's absolutely key if we're going to make progress in the future.